Welcome to episode 5 of Bear Dash. I'm Shaylin,
I'm Jasper.
and we have a lot to talk about. For many weeks, it was looking like football in the Pac 12 was not going to be a thing this year, but tides are turning. The Big Ten just announced that they are planning to start football in mid October, and the Pac 12 is facing a lot of pressure to follow, and it looks like there will be football in 2020, if not early 2021. So we'll be talking about that, how the Pac-12 being ineligible either way for the CFP affects the reputation of the conference, and then a little bit of Cal's expectations this season and in the future. So our first topic is the impact that the Pac-12 is going to face by not being eligible for the college football playoff. So based on what Larry Scott has said, the earliest the conference is going to start is mid to late November, around Thanksgiving time. And what that means is the Pac 12 will absolutely be ineligible for the college football playoffs. There's just no way that they'll finish a season in time. And if the season was that short, there would be just no chance that the strength of schedule would be enough that a team would make the college football playoff. So the Big Ten is playing an eight game season. The Pac 12 is rumored to probably do the same, but there's also a chance of a 6 game or 10 game season. There's also rumors that the Pac 12 will try to have a championship game at the Rose Bowl, either between the Pac 12 North and South champions or possibly between the Pac 12 and Big Ten champions. The original goal, Larry Scott said, was to align the Pac 12 and Big Ten timelines, but obviously that's not happening now that the Big Ten is starting much earlier than the Pac 12. But there has been some breaking news today. One of the main roadblocks of the Pac 12 restarting was that Larry Scott said the governors of California and Oregon had not allowed practices to resume yet. But California Governor Gavin Newsom just announced that the Pac 12 should be all cleared to play. They're going to sort out some things, but that's a big step towards getting the season to happen. But back on track, Jasper, what are the ramifications of the Pac 12 not being eligible for the college football playoff, even if they do play this season?
Yeah. Specifically, this scenario, it hurts the Pac 12 because it does guarantee a fourth season without a representative from the conference in the CFP. The Pac 12 has taken a lot of heat the past couple of seasons. No team has been able to rise above the others. You saw Oregon made a run last season that was cut short. Utah could have had a chance, cut short by Oregon in the conference championship game. So no Pac 12 team has really stepped up to the plate. And this season is just going to extend that. It's always possible that the schedule gets shifted around so that the Pac-12 team will have a shot. But that just doesn't seem realistic given the timelines involved when the conference thinks it'll have testing available and when they could run the season. So in short, it hurts the Pac-12, but I do think there are definite positive ramifications here. But I think the primary underlying question is, could a Pac-12 team actually make the CFP this season?
Yeah, like you said, a team hasn't qualified since 2016. But to be honest, UW didn't have a chance in that game against Alabama. Sorry to the guys at Husky Dash. They just didn't. The Pac-12's most recent realistic chance, in my opinion, was Oregon in 2014. They lost to Ohio State in the championship, but Ohio State just had a stacked roster. They didn't really have a chance. But onto this season, in the AP preseason top 25 poll, USC came in at number 17, Utah at 22, and Oregon led the race at number 9 in the national rankings. But this does not matter. This timeline does not matter. None of them are going to make it. There's no chance a Pac-12 team made the college football playoff this season. There's an off chance that maybe if everything went right for Oregon, just because of how stacked their defense was, that they could have made it if they had gone undefeated. But new quarterback, new offensive line, and plus the opt-outs now, I don't think Oregon ever really stood a chance to do it. And I don't think anyone else in the conference stood any chance whatsoever.
Yeah. And that would really make any pretenses at Pac-12 CFP a moot point. I disagree, though. I think a Pac-12 team absolutely could have made the CFP this season. For a lot of reasons. This is a season unlike any other. With an all-conference schedule, it just takes one team to have a good run. And there's a lot of teams that can have good runs. You mentioned Oregon. Utah has a great coaching staff. Washington is a wild card. Arizona State's an up-and-comer. And, of course, Cal, big dark horse, a lot of potential there. You just need one team to win a couple games, put together something near undefeated. And I think that the biggest thing that would help a Pac-12 team making a run is the fact that other conferences are going to struggle. The SEC running an all-conference schedule means a team like Alabama doesn't have a cakewalk of a schedule like they usually do. They're not going to railroad those non-conference teams that they get to play from the FCS. Now they have to play Georgia, Auburn, and LSU in the same season. And you're not going to come out as a one-loss or undefeated team if you have a schedule that's that tough. You're not going to produce multiple high-caliber teams, and that gives an opportunity for a Pac-12 side to sneak in. For that reason, I think
you look at the Pac-12 conference-only schedule, though, and that strength of schedule isn't anywhere near an SEC conference-only schedule. You said that a team to make the playoff from the Pac-12 would need a near undefeated season. To make the playoff, they would need to go undefeated, say an 8-game season. I think for a Pac-12 team, we'll say Oregon, to have any shot of making the playoff, they would need to go 8-0 and have an average margin of victory of 15 points. I don't think if they don't blow everyone out, there's no chance the College Football Playoff Committee will give them I don't think they'll give them a shot because you can't prove enough in the Pac-12. And I don't even think, let alone one loss won't cut it. I don't think any Pac-12 teams will finish with one loss. I think it's going to be the same type of thing we saw last season where the Pac-12 just cannibalizes itself. Everyone's close to 500. I mean, there's always one or two outliers, and Oregon could be one of them. But with everything going on, I just don't see it.
That's an interesting point. I do think there actually are teams that could do it. Oregon, the opt-outs hurt them, but I think it puts Cal in a great position in the Pac-12 North. USC is really strong in the Pac-12 South. Either of those teams could have made a run, but I want to actually circle back to a point you made about seeing potentially a bunch of 500 teams, a bunch of teams right around, if it's an 8-game schedule, 4-4, if it's a 9-game schedule, 5-4. I said there would be positive ramifications to the Pac-12 not playing in time for the CFP. And I think it becomes that the Pac-12 is the only show in town. Let's say the Pac-12 doesn't start till November. Let's say the Pac-12 is the only conference or the only major conference playing football in the late winter and in the early spring after the CFP takes place. Suddenly, you're a conference that has national attention just because of the fact that no one else is playing. And I think I actually like this scenario a lot more. And I think it could be one of the main benefits of not partaking in the CFP if the Pac-12 is the only conference playing come late winter, come early spring. It means it's a very competitive conference. It's going to get a lot of viewership because, hey, not much else is happening. And you know it's going to be an exciting season. That's more media attention. That's more attention for players. That's a national footprint.
For that to happen, though, I don't know the specifics at all, but for this national attention you talk about, if the Pac-12 were to be the only conference playing in, say, January and February, I believe the Pac-12 would have to renegotiate a TV deal because as of now, the bulk of their games are on Pac-12 network. It's not like if the Pac-12 was playing in February that all the games would just all of a sudden be broadcasted nationally and people from the East would be watching Pac-12 games. It doesn't work like that. And that would take a lot of negotiation on the Pac-12's part with TV broadcasters to get those games nationally. But the Pac-12 is just not at a point where they're nationally relevant at all. I mean, I'm from Georgia, and even diehard college football fans there know nothing about these teams. No matter how much USC or Oregon or UW or Stanford wants to think they're nationally relevant, they're just not anymore. The SEC fans do not care about the Pac-12 at all.
Well, that's exactly the thing. I think this puts you in, if you're the Pac-12, if you're a Pac-12 team, it puts you in a scenario where you're nationally relevant just by way of being the only supply in town. No one else is going to be playing. And it remains to be seen how long this season goes. But if you are the only college football, if you're the only thing happening on Saturdays, people are going to watch. Networks are going to want to carry you. I guarantee that. I think one thing a lot of folks in the conference have talked about is despite the fact that the Pac-12 isn't producing a national title contender every season, it is the most exciting conference because it's competitive. Think about it this way. Let's say the ACC was the only league playing in the spring. Would you really want to watch an 8-game schedule where Clemson just beats up on the ACC for 2 months, and then you have a title game that Clemson wins? That's not entertaining. The Pac-12 is a big opportunity here because it is a legitimately entertaining conference, and as a standalone season with no one else watching, with nothing else on the line, I think people are going to tune in. I would absolutely tune into a late season game where a big game where Cal and Stanford are both 4-3 and competing for maybe a shot at the Pac-12 North title. And I think that does give you an opportunity to step up to the national level because there are difficulties involved, but I think if I'm a network and like I said, it's the only show in town, I'm carrying it on a Saturday morning and a Saturday evening. That's an absolute boon.
At that point, the Pac-12 will be nearing the end of its season, in 2021, but around that same time is when the college football playoff is going to be happening, is when the NFL playoff race is heating up. I just think you're overestimating how much people care about the Pac-12 who aren't on the West Coast or Colorado, Utah, those places.
It definitely remains to be seen, but I absolutely feel that the Pac-12 would get more media attention then than it would during the regular season, just because there's more people to watch. I mean, you and I are going to cover the Pac-12 season. We know a lot of Pac-12 fans are going to tune in no matter what, no matter where, no matter when. And so it just remains to all the other folks out there who, like you said, I wouldn't normally tune in to watch Washington play Oregon, who wouldn't normally have an amazing idea of who's the starting quarterback for UCLA or Cal. Suddenly those folks are going to want to be involved. And maybe it's not the entire country, but it certainly is going to be a sizable group of folks, or at least a larger group of folks than you'd have in a normal college football season.
Yeah, so there's pros and cons to it, but that was a macro lens. We're going to zoom back into what we are, Bear Dash, talking about Cal. What would constitute success for Cal in a shortened Pac-12 season? Say, for example, like the Big Ten, 8 games, all against Pac-12 opponents, which Cal, even in the Wilcox era, has had very up and down success with. What would constitute a successful season in your eyes?
Yeah. I'd also like to circle back to that last question real quick. There's been a lot of talk about, is it smart to wait? Is it smart to postpone? I think it's always smart to listen to medical experts, to be patient, to be cautious. It is just a game, and we are playing during a pandemic. It's always smart to allocate those resources where they're needed. But to this question, what is success for Cal in a shortened season? There are a lot of answers here. For me, it's pretty simple. Cal has never had a winning record in Pac-12 play under Justin Wilcox. I mean, to be more specific, I think that's the goal here. You're for the Wilcox era. There's no non-conference games. A successful season is one with a winning record. It's one where you come out 5-3 in an 8-game season, 6-4 in a 10-game season. I know that seems pretty low. Cal has never lost a regular season non-conference game under Justin Wilcox. That's helped their records every year. This season, turn it around, have a winning record in Pac-12 play. And for me, that's a good season. And maybe the cherry on top is another win in the big game. And then you're rounding it out. You're building a good platform again, and you'll have a lot of returners on offense the year after.
For me, I agree with you, but my expectations are a bit higher for this team. I think that a successful season means winning 75% of the games. If it's an 8-game season, I think anything worse than 6-2 is a failure for Cal. This team talked all the time about the players, the coaches have said over and over again that the goal is to win the Pac-12 North and make the Rose Bowl. That's not like a stretch goal anymore. Their regular goal used to be to make a bowl game. Now those standards are higher because of the success they've had under Coach Wilcox. And you're right, the record has been inflated by non-conference games, but we've been teetering on the edge of taking this so-called next step as a program. And just because players are opting out or declaring for the draft early doesn't mean that those goals should shift backwards. I think for a successful season, Cal needs to win 6 games out of 8. That's just anything less than that. They're just what I was saying before, the mediocre 500 record group of the Pac-12 where no one knows who's better than who. Cal needs to prove themselves that they have the ability to win these games because even with these losses, they're still one of the most experienced teams in the Pac-12 without Bynum, without Beckett. I don't know if they can pull it off. There's still a lot of uncertainty heading into the season. I'm sure the Pac-12 is going to see a couple more players opt out between now and then. But this team has to prove that they can take the next step. If these are actually their goals, they can't just be talk. They need to produce on the field.
Yeah. For me, it's tough to know what this season's going to look like, and that's what does it for me. And like in sort of this time of chaos, will we have a Rose Bowl? Will we have a Pac-12 championship game? Obviously, these are things that Larry Scott's talked about wanting to do. But because I feel like a lot of that is up in the air, for me, it's just go positive in the Pac-12. I think another aspect you can look at, though, beyond just sort of your win-loss and your record, is performance-wise. You talked about a lot of losses on defense. We've seen a lot of opt-outs, transfers. The defense is going to change this season. And we knew this was coming because this defense was laden with veteran talent. But we're really seeing a turnover. It's been, again, the fourth year of the Justin Wilcox era. These are players that have been in this program for all 4 years, and now they're starting to leave. And that means you have to build from the ground up again. So I think another great metric for success is that the defense can resettle, and you can see a lot of young players blossom. We saw Brett Johnson grow last season as a freshman. We've talked about Chiggy and Uzium in past episodes. If the defense can come out and have a really solid year where young players are able to blossom throughout a shortened season and become key contributors, I think you could consider this successful as well, no matter the record. If you could rebuild the defense by the end of the season and rebuild in a way where you're looking at multi-year starters going forward, young guys who are stepping in and taking charge, I think that could be a really successful season, even if you maybe sit at 500.
You're absolutely right. I mean, losing Evan Weaver, Ashton Davis, Jalen Hawkins, Cam Bynum, and Luke Beckett in the same offseason is extremely tough. Like, there's going to be so much turnover on that defense, but it's going to be interesting to see which young players can emerge as the up-and-coming stars for the Cal defense. You named a couple, Brett Johnson, Chiganesium. We haven't seen any of the 2020 guys play yet, but they have a lot of potential, and I think it's really about finding those next stars, because even the players that are currently set to play this upcoming season, like Coin Dang, Cam Good, they're stud players, but those guys are going to be gone soon. So it's really about finding the new leaders on the team. Who's going to lead the team after this season? And that's very important defensively. And I think the overall theme of the season, you talk about not just defining success by wins or losses. It's got to be defensive consistency, right? Even with all this turnover, Wilcox needs to make sure the team keeps its defensive identity and remains consistent among the best in the Pac-12. But arguably even more importantly is improvement offensively. How big of a step can the offense take under Bill Musgrave? Because for those of you who don't know, Cal has been sitting dead last in the Pac-12 in total offense for the past 2 seasons. And there's a lot of questions surrounding the offense, and people have been wanting to see that. So there's different ways you could define success offensively. How does Chase Garbers emerge as a top caliber quarterback? I mean, people forget that he had 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions, and Cal went 7-0 in the games that he played in its entirety. Like, he has so much potential that if he takes that next step and the offensive line can stay healthy and the offense can even just get to the middle of the pack in the Pac-12 instead of the very bottom, that could be looked at as a successful season.
Absolutely. You mentioned this on the defensive side of the ball, but I'm going to go ahead and give it as a buzzword for the entire team. I think the goal for this season is consistency. It's for the defense to replenish that talent, to be consistent. It's for the offense to be consistent as well. Chase Garbers was a great winner. Like you said, when he was under pocket for a majority of the game, Cal was winning. But he only had 1 300-plus yard game. He had 3 multi-touchdown games, only 3. And he needs to stay healthy. If he can put together a season where he's throwing for over 300 yards in multiple games, he's having regular multi-touchdown performances, he's staying healthy, staying in the pocket, he's not getting injured when he leaves the pocket, then I think that's a successful season for him. That's going to raise his draft stock, and that will turn the offense from something that needs to be carried into something that can do the carrying. And I think that comes at every position. If the Cal receiver can finish in the top 10 in the conference in receiving yards, I think that's successful. There's a lot of guys who can do that. Nico Remigio led Cal in receiving yards last year. Makai Polk was on fire at the end of the season. Incoming freshman tight end DJ Rogers has a lot of expectations and hype on him. But again, can one of those players step up, be a primary target, and produce throughout the year, not just have one big game like Remigio and Polk did. And that goes to all the way down in the backfield. Cal's going to have a really talented running backs room, but Chris Bound Jr. is the undisputed starter. He was number 6 in rush yards in the Pac-12, but he was inconsistent. He averaged 70 yards a game, but his median yards per game was 54, right? So he's, again, having big games, and then he's disappearing in some games. Can the offense just produce consistently? Because all these guys are talented. They just need to, like you said, take the next step forward.
And a lot of
that's another part.
A lot of that is about the offensive line staying healthy. That's going to be another metric for success. Can they build chemistry and gel while they're healthy? Because Cal faced so many offensive line issues in terms of health last season. That's going to be something to watch for. And then I think the final metric to define success is can the Bears win those sort of key games? You talked about the big game. Cal finally got over that hump for the first time in a decade last season. But you look at a team like Oregon, who's among the best teams in the country. Cal has fallen short against Oregon the past couple seasons. And if you look at a team like Utah, Cal got absolutely destroyed by Utah that season. And I think it's those key games where, like, maybe Cal loses a game they're not supposed to. But then if you bounce back and beat a team like Oregon or Utah, I think you can look at that as overall being a successful season, however you want to define that.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think those big flagship games against Oregon, Cal's had UW's number the last couple of years, and then also against Stanford is obviously always going to be a big one when they play USC as well. But for me, it's actually the opposite side of the coin. I want Cal to be consistent. I want them to win the games they can. You think about last season, Cal lost to Arizona State, Oregon State. Those are both really winnable games. I want to see, if you remember last year, and I'm sure you do because you were covering this one, Cal beating Wazoo, right, with Devin Monster under center. And it was a game they should win. It was a game a lot of people, I think, did not think they would win because of injuries and because it just seemed like a game Cal was going to drop. Those are the games I want to see Cal winning. I want to see Cal winning the games it should. And then, get close in the games that are tough. Get an upset or two. But I think, again, the key is consistently. You got to go out there. You got to perform well throughout the season, and you got to win the games you should, be tight in the games you should be. And that's a big part of being successful. Cal needs to avoid upsets. And I think that, again, will, for me, constitute that's a step forward. You're going from a team that's targeting bowl games and inconsistent week in, week out to a team that's consistently good and consistently able to win.
Yeah, so those are our expectations for this season. But looking at an even bigger lens, does the pandemic and Corona change expectations for Cal football's future, looking not just this season, but also 1, 2, 3 years down the line from now?
For me, it absolutely does. And I think you and we differed a little bit in the last episode, or in the last segment. I'm sorry, we were talking about expectations for this season, and I think that goes into the future. We talked about Cal being a dark horse this year, being a team that could potentially compete for a non-conference title, and I think the implication there is that the year after, Cal is more of a legitimate contender. For me, all these expectations are delayed by a year. Without a non-conference slate, I don't expect the same things from Cal. It's a tough conference. Things are chaotic. But especially if the pandemic lasts into 2021, I can really see Cal. You take an extra year. You need to redevelop your defense. Like we said, they've lost a lot of players. And maybe next year's your dark horse year. And then the year after that, you become a legitimate contender. I think you're trying to juggle a lot of things. You want your offense to peak at the same time as your defense. And I don't feel like that's going to happen with the opt-outs, with the losses in the draft, with the transfers. And so for me, it does change expectations going forward. I feel like Cal is still on an upward trajectory, but there's just been a bit of a pause.
Yeah. And we'll jump to a chat question really quick. From Oscar, he says Cal always seems to struggle against lower opponents, like UC Davis game was brutal, and even the Washington State game. And that's absolutely the most frustrating thing about being a Cal fan, is that they seem to play down to their opponents and up to their opponents. No one expected Cal to beat UW. Cal goes out and beats UW at 2 a.m. But then there's teams that Cal should have a walk in the park against, and they just seem like they're out there and don't even care. And that's something, when we talk about looking into the future of this team, that's one thing that Cal, as a football program, it needs to become part of their identity and part of their culture, that they're going to bring the intensity every game. Because some of Cal's losses over the past few years in the Wilcox era have been really inexcusable, and some of the wins have been extremely surprising. So you talked about this a bit in the last segment about this upcoming season, but I think consistency as a program as a whole needs to get better. And I think the pandemic does make that hard. It's really hard to be consistent when you don't know what's going on. But I think the future is bright. Cal has one of the Pac-12's best 2021 recruiting classes, 4th best in the Pac-12 right now. You have Jamichael Sturdivant and Maven Anderson, both 4-star recruits at wide receiver, and then Jermaine Terry, another 4-star at tight end. So the offense is going to be stacked, and that's not even to mention Jaden Casey, a 2020 recruit who, he had an offer from Alabama, and we're not going to see what he gets to do until Chase Garbers is gone. So there's a lot to look forward to on the team, but the pandemic does affect that. But I wouldn't say that everything necessarily gets pushed back a year, because a lot of the players that are gone were going to be gone anyways. Like guys like Coin Dang, Cam Good, who might have gained the ability to play in 2021. Sorry, that's getting all confusing with the years, since the spring season is technically 2021, but fall season was supposed to be 2021. But those guys weren't going to be here anyways for the season after this one. And it's on the younger guys defensively now to prove that Cal can maintain its upward trajectory. But I think that goes back to the coaching staff. They've proven they can develop talent into, some of the best players in the conference, even if they are 3-star recruits or whatever the case may be. And I think as long as this coaching staff maintains its core, then you're going to see that same trend moving 2-3 years down the line.
Yeah, and that wouldn't surprise me. We know this is a talented coaching staff, and all the credit to them. They've consistently overperformed. They've consistently been brilliant. I think for me, this is a simple question, though. Would I expect Cal to be a Rose Bowl contender next season? And my answer is no. And I think before the pandemic, my answer might have been yes. And so that's where it changes for me. But I will say this: Cal surprised me in the past, in both good ways and bad ways. So I would not count it out at all. But like you said, the chaos of the pandemic has to temper expectations. It has to change things. Who really knows? So that's why my expectations change for the Bears.
Yeah, and there's a lot of change going on for the rest of the Pac-12 teams too. When you talk about teams being affected, we don't know what the Pac-12 as a whole, how they're going to face these pandemic ramifications. Is there going to be a long-term recruiting issue in the Pac-12 for maybe the 2021 and 2022 classes? Is there going to be issues with revenue and TV deals? That remains to be seen, but that's going to affect the conference as a whole, not just Cal specifically. But that's about all the time we have for this show. We have some news that Bear Dash does columns now. We partnered with sportspac12.com, so you can find all our written work exclusively on their site. Make sure you follow them on Twitter at sportspac12. Other than that, I'm Shaylin with my co-host Jasper. We are Dash Sports TV. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Thank you guys very much.